continue on the dialogues walkthrough. So for this one, we have already finished two different dialogues. The first dialogue that uses the positive and negative buttons, and a second dialogue that uses the list of elements as the dialogue's content. Now we're gonna be working on two other dialogues. So first, we're gonna be looking at a new dialogue that we're gonna use such that when we click enter, we get a dialog to enter the address lines 1 and 2. So for that one, there is not a dialog that has two different text inputs for us to work with, so we're gonna have to create our own. So we still need a class that extends from the dialog fragment, and we're still gonna need to override the onCreate dialog. Now, just as we did on the previous two, we're still gonna be creating another dialog using the builder, but we're gonna have to do a couple additional steps in order for it to have what we need. So what we need is to use the layout that we have on this file called fragment treats. This is just a simple layout, a linear layout with an image and some edit text for us to enter the input. So the first thing we want to do is to inflate this view. So we're gonna use the layout inflator. So we're gonna say it's a require activity dot get layout inflator. So we're gonna initialize it, and then we're gonna create the view. This is gonna be a final view. It's gonna be the root view of our fragment or of our fragment dialog. So we're gonna inflate. Now we need to say what layout we want to inflate. We want to inflate the layout called fragment treats.xml. And we don't have another root because this is going to be the root, so that's going to be null. Now we say that we tell the builder that the view for this one is going to be the view that we inflated. So that's going to be the content of this dialog that we're looking at. Now we're going to set the positive button. We're going to say this is going to be the string.sign-in, and we're going to be needing a listener, so this is going to be the okay listener. Now if we go up here, we can do the same thing that we did previously. We're just gonna create a new listener. Again, it needs to be a dialog interface and click listener. Yeah, I know that I don't need that code anymore though. So what we're gonna be doing here is doing something similar to what we did before. So we're gonna be getting the activity itself. So this is going to be the main activity. This is because we already have a method that is in charge of setting up the content. We could also move this code into here by getting the references themselves. Well, we're just gonna be using the same method that we used on the main fragment. So this is going to be get activity. And then we can say activity dot set address, and then we need lines 1 and 2. Now, how do we get the content of those? Well, we have to use the find view by ID. So these are both going to be edit texts. So let's go line 1. It's gonna be equals. Now, we generally go and say, oh, we need the context of our activity, and we can do find view by ID, and then we can say get r dot id dot, and this should be address 1, and then we can do the same with line 2, and we have an element that's called address 2. This is address 1, address 2, and then we just set it here. Now this is gonna be the text of those two. So let's get the text. That's going to be the notable. So I need to get the toString just to get the string version. Same thing with the other one. Now as you can tell, Android is like, okay, this is fine. I need to change the listener to okay listener. I'll create dialog, and then when we come here, we have that one is the address listener. So it's just the same thing as we did before. There is no changes on any of those. So it's going to be the custom address dialog, and then the tag is going to be dialog 8. Notice how we didn't do anything significantly different here. We just did the same thing as before. Create an instance of the class that we're going to be using as the dialog and click on show. The main difference here is how we inflate the content of it. So we're just using a custom view or a custom root view, and then we're just setting it as part of the builder itself. Now once we click enter, we have the address line. We can enter some information here. And then if we click accept, our application crashes. Now, if you want to pause the video and try to figure out why the application crashed, do that now. And once you come back, we will look at the code and figure out why that happened. Okay, if you're back, then let's look at the log over here. We can see that we actually had a null pointer exception when you try to call the edit test.getText. Now, this doesn't really tell you much other than the problem was trying to get the text of these two elements. So what that happens, or what is happening right now, is that the edit text variables are null pointers. Why are they null pointers? Because you're trying to get the find views in the main activity. Now the main activity does not have either the address 1 or address 2 elements. Those two exist in the root view of your class. So what's gonna be happening is that you're gonna have to get a reference to this root view. So in order to do that, you can just declare it above here. So it might not have been initialized. So let's initialize it to null here. Cannot assign, oh, cannot use the final one. Okay, let's make it non-final. And then here, instead of get activity, we're just gonna use the root view of our dialog. And then this root view is the one that has those UI elements, because that's the one where we inflated this. So let's run it once again. Enter an address. Keep in mind that we're not doing any error checking here. So we could leave them empty if we wanted. Click accept, and it's filled out here. So that's the thing that you want to know when you're dealing with custom views, is that you have to use a reference to the view that you're inflating in order to get the elements from your fragment or from your dialog fragment themselves, instead of using the activity get activity as you will usually do if you were in the activity itself. Now, if you're referencing a widget that is inside of the main activity, then yes, you will do get activity dot find view by ID, as we did on the dialog with list over here. So now we're gonna go and work on the last dialog, This is going to be a date picker dialog. Now for this one, we don't have to create a new class because this is actually a pre-made dialog class. So all that we need to do is use create a variable of that type. It's going to be a date picker dialog. And then we're going to be using it over here. For dialog.show. So that's all we need to do to get a date picker. Now, just having the dialog itself is not enough. So what we need to do is override a listener for the date picker dialog. So for this one, what we need to do is create a new listener over here. So let's just go ahead and do it underneath. That's fine. So this is going to be on date set listener. So this is going to be a listener that is going to be automatically called whenever date is selected on the date picker dialog. Oops. New. And then we need to do this. Okay, perfect. Now what we have here is we're gonna have the date picker itself, and then the first element is gonna be the year, the second element is gonna be the month, and the third element is gonna be the day. Now we want to set the value that we were given or that was selected into the date text view. So let's just find a reference to it. The view, and then I'm just gonna use a calendar object to convert those three values into a single array that contains the date. So here I just have to pass in the year, month, and day. Now, if you're not familiar with Java, this is just a very Java way of using the pre-made classes to convert your data into a particular date format. So here we just pass the pattern that we want. So we want to have it in month, day, and year. And then you additionally need a local. This is just to ensure that your date is formatted properly. If you're dealing with localization, then that local will be need to be changed based on where your phone configuration is. Now we can just get a string version of it. And then we can set it to the text view. Okay, let's say that the set listener. Now we need to bind that listener to our dialog. So the picker dialog dot set on the listener to be this one. Now we can execute the code. And it crashed. So let's look at the code. We're trying to invoke the virtual method set on the listener with a null pointer. Okay. Picker dialog. But this is the problem. This is null. Oh, I haven't initialized it. The speaker dialog equals new the speaker dialog. I'm missing something on the constructor. I'm missing the context. The speaker dialog. Let me check the constructor. Yeah, I'm missing the context. So here, let's just say the context is this. Then we click here. Okay, perfect. Now we get the date picker dialog. So if you remember, this is the date picker widget. Now we learned that it takes a lot of space, so having it rendered on the screen the whole time is not really efficient space-wise. So a dialog tells us to select the date will be the ideal. So we can just select the date that we want and we click OK. That value is parsed and put into our UI. Now we have all of our 4 different dialogues working. They use different ways to transfer data and different ways to render, different options that we want to use in our application, and to connect all of those into our single activity. So if you want to play more around with this, I will say if you're not very familiar with Java and random, just look on how to bind the treats number to be a more reasonable number and to add a small error checking here on the others to make sure that those are not empty. And if you want to play a little bit more with the custom dialog, you could create your own dialog that takes on more than 2 elements or 2 text content. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.